Welcome to the channel. Today we're sharing a cheating story you won't believe. If you enjoy it, please like and subscribe. Let's get started. Sheriff Ethan Caldwell of Springville, Mississippi got out of his patrol car, adjusting his belt as he stood up. He was starting his third term as sheriff. At 43, he wasn't the leanest, but he carried himself well. He stood tall at 5'11" in his cowboy boots, weighing a bit over 215 pounds. His face was flushed red, especially his nose, from long hours outdoors and maybe a little too much whiskey. The evening was cold, with the sun setting behind Maple Ridge. The coming night promised to be dark, with no moonlight to help. As he shut the car door, his breath turned to mist in the chilly air. The small house ahead was at the edge of a hollow leading to fields. It was early fall and most of the trees were bare, except for a few pines near the path. The large oaks and hickories around the house swayed in the wind like skeletons coming to life. Ethan climbed the 3 porch steps of the log cabin, a Colt .45 in one hand and a pair of handcuffs in the other. He rapped on the door with the handle of the gun. "Collins, come out," Liam ordered. "Keep your hands free and where I can see them." Slowly, the door opened and Noah Turner stepped out onto the porch. Daniel was a young-looking 37, tall and trim at 190 pounds. With his dark hair, blue eyes, and a square chin, most single women in town and some married ones considered him to be ruggedly handsome. "What's with the Collins stuff, Liam?" Daniel asked in a puzzled voice. "We've been best friends since we were high school freshmen. You've never called me by my last name." Looking down, he saw the Colt in Liam's hand. "Why the gun?" Now his tone was a cross between puzzlement and anger. Sheriff Blackwood pointed the gun at Daniel. "Don't give me any trouble and put your hands out in front of you. Our friendship won't stop me from shooting you if you try anything." Daniel looked at the Colt, then at Liam's eyes and put out his hands. Liam tossed the restraints to Daniel. "Put those on and then we'll talk." Not having a choice, Daniel put one cuff around his left wrist and the other one around his right. He locked them up. "Now, where were you last night, Daniel?" "Right here all night." "You alone?" Daniel hesitated for just a second. "Yep, I worked on the corral until dusk, cooked supper, and went to bed around 8, I reckon." He had not been alone, but he couldn't tell Liam that. Daniel and Liam's wife, Charlotte, had spent most of the night together, and it wasn't the first time. Daniel and Charlotte had been high school sweethearts. They planned on getting married when they graduated and Daniel got a job. Springville was a small town and there weren't many jobs available. So Daniel enlisted in the army to get a stake put together so he and Charlotte could marry. He also hoped to learn a skill that would make finding a job a bit easier. 2 events happened while he was in the army that would lead to the secret meetings between the young lovers. Daniel's parents died during his 3rd year in the army. He came home for the funeral and found his folks had left him their farm and cabin. Daniel had 1 more year in his enlistment before he could come home and run the farm. The other event affected Charlotte the most but also broke Daniel's heart. Her parents hit hard times and they were about to lose their business and their home. Ethan Caldwell told Charlotte if she would marry him, he would pay off her parents' home and pay all the back bills from the business. Charlotte liked Liam, they'd gone to the same school, but she didn't love him. She loved Daniel and was waiting on him to come home. Charlotte and her parents didn't have anywhere to go if they lost the house and business, and there was no chance of making a living in Springville. So Charlotte decided she had to take care of them and agreed to marry Liam. She had tears leaking from her eyes during the ceremony. "What's this about, Liam?" Daniel asked. "Nick Rogers was killed in front of the town hall just after dark last night," Liam answered, "shot with a .357 caliber gun." "You own a Smith Wesson .357, don't you?" "Yes, I own a .357, but I didn't kill him, Liam. He ran bad moonshine, cheated at cards, and stole things when he had the chance. It's no surprise he got shot. Got 2 witnesses at the scene who gave a description that sounds a lot like you. They said they saw a man running away from the body. Said the man was about 6 feet, slender. Said they saw dark hair when the man's hat fell off when he started running." "Sure sounds like you, Daniel. Sounds like a lot of other men too, Liam." "How did those witnesses see the color of the murderer's hair?" "It was the dark of the moon. That big streetlight they put up on the town hall was burning bright. You know, it's almost as bright as daytime." "I didn't kill Dawson." Daniel shook his head. "Hell, I didn't like him, but I had no reason to shoot him." "Where's your Smith Wesson, Daniel?" "It's on the nightstand by the bed." "Come on, I'll show you." Daniel turned and started to go back into the house. "Hold it right there," Daniel Miller ordered and cocked his pistol. He'll put you in the back of the patrol car and then he'll go check on the gun. Holding on to his arm, Liam directed Daniel toward the back door of the patrol car and opened it. Using a technique every cop has used to put someone into a car, Liam put his hand on the back of Daniel's head to protect the suspect. Instead of protecting Daniel, Liam used his leverage to ram Daniel's head into the door frame. "Watch your head, Daniel." After he put his man into the car, Liam leaned over. "I know you weren't alone last night, and I know who you were with. Now you're going to pay, Daniel. You're going to pay big time. I know you didn't kill Jimmy. I did, and good riddance. But I am going to see you convicted of the murder and watch you hang, and then my cheating wife is going to pay. Yes, Charlotte is going to pay for fooling around on me her own self." Liam stood up, slammed the door, and walked into the house to retrieve the .357 pistol. Pulling on a thin pair of gloves, he came out onto the front porch and fired 2 shots into the ground in front of the cabin. Liam dropped the big pistol into an evidence bag and removed his gloves. "I do believe this weapon's been fired recently," he said and laughed. Liam climbed into the driver's seat and turned halfway around. "And the only fingerprints on the gun are yours, Daniel. You fired that gun just now." Daniel's jaws were clenched in anger. "They'll tell them about that, you backstabbing bastard. They'll say I didn't, and they'll say you tried to hide the gun. Now, who are they going to believe, Daniel? They going to believe an accused murderer or the fine, upstanding county sheriff?" After a short 15-minute drive, the patrol car pulled into the sheriff's reserved parking space at the courthouse. Springville was the county seat of Jackson County. The courthouse served both Jackson County and the locals of the small town. There was a lawn, benches, and a walking trail through the large courthouse square that surrounded the large quarried stone building. The building contained 2 courtrooms, county records from as far back as the late 1800s, as well as the town's records, the sheriff's office, and a jail with 2 cells. The jail usually held men who had overindulged in moonshine or whiskey, and once in a while a husband in a domestic abuse case. Tonight it would hold Noah Turner, an innocent man accused of murder. The next morning at 9, Daniel was led into the main courtroom to be arraigned on the charge of murder in the 1st degree. Martin Hayes, Liam's cousin, was the presiding judge. He was also the owner of the bank and the richest man in the county. "Do you have an attorney, young man?" Judge Hayes asked. "No, sir. I was brought here last night late, and this is the first time I've been out of my cell," Daniel answered. "Sheriff Blackwood, make sure this young man gets to use the phone so he can obtain legal counsel." "Yes, sir, Your Honor. They'll do that first thing." Turning back to Daniel, the judge continued, "You have been charged with the premeditated murder of one Philip Harris. How do you plead? We can go ahead, and if once you get representation you want to change or amend your plea, we will revisit the question." Daniel couldn't believe how fast things were going. He looked at Ethan Caldwell, who was grinning, and then at Judge Hayes, who had a bit of a smirk on his face. Daniel didn't know that the judge was aware and approved of what the sheriff was doing. Judge Hayes held a grudge for a long time. Daniel's parents had openly and loudly opposed Miller each time he ran in an election for the judgeship. They would bring to light some shady business dealings and moral issues. They never quite stopped Miller from being elected, but their efforts stopped his advance in the state legal system. Miller was relegated to being a small-town and county judge, a small fish in an even smaller pond. The parents were long dead, but Daniel would do for the judge's revenge. "Not guilty, Judge," Daniel proclaimed. "I didn't kill Dawson and Liam knows it." "Well, get into all that during the trial, young man." Turning to Liam, he said, "Take him back to his cell and make sure he gets his phone call." Back in the cell area, the deputy sheriff, Blake, sat Daniel down at a table with a phone and a phone book. Daniel looked through the book and found only 2 attorneys in the area. One was the county prosecuting attorney, the other one was Sam Chilton, so he called Chilton. The lawyer agreed to meet with Daniel the first thing the next morning. Chilton was sitting in a sort of conference room the next morning when Daniel was led into the room in handcuffs and ankle shackles. He was cuffed to a round bar welded into the stationary table. After Daniel was situated, Chilton looked at him. "Mr. Collins, I should not have agreed to meet with you. I am involved in several other legal actions and would not have the time to properly represent you in a murder trial." Chilton stood up, gathered his briefcase, and spoke. "I hope you do okay with your trial. Goodbye, Mr. Collins." He turned and left the conference room. "What the hell?" Daniel thought. Shaking his head, he was ready to defend me yesterday. Liam came in to take him back to his cell. "I need to call a lawyer in Westwood," Daniel said. "Can you get me a phone book for there?" Couldn't find an attorney here and thought I'd try the big city. Did you, Daniel? Liam said. Westwood was about 90 miles east and a little south of Springville, with a population of just over 220,000. He grabbed Daniel's arm. You had the one phone call you're allowed. Let's get you back to your cell. Don't worry, you ain't gonna be there long. As Liam pushed his prisoner back into the cell, he leaned in and whispered, I told you I am gonna watch you hang. The sheriff locked the cell door and left. The next time Daniel was taken out of his cell was for his appearance in court. Liam escorted him down the hallway to the courtroom. Daniel shuffled along. He was handcuffed with shackles on his feet, and he could only take very small steps. Just before opening the door, Liam moved closer to Daniel and whispered, If you mention anything about Charlotte, he'll kill her. Do you understand? He'll take her over behind Silver Ridge, put a bullet in her head, bury her, and not lose a minute's sleep about it. Liam moved away and added, I am as serious as a heart attack, Daniel. Liam sat him down at a table in front of the judge's bench and took off the handcuffs, but the leg shackles stayed on and he stood close to Daniel. Judge Hayes straightened a few papers and then banged his gavel. Jackson County, State of Mississippi versus Noah Turner on the charge of murder in the first degree is called to order. Turning to Charles Norton, the county attorney and prosecutor, Miller asked, Are you ready to proceed, Mr. Norton? Yes, Your Honor, Norton answered as he stood up. Do you have counsel, Mr. Collins? The judge asked. No, sir. The only other lawyer in town said he wouldn't take my case. I wanted to call a lawyer in Westwood, but Liam wouldn't let me. Said I'd already had my phone call. So, you will be defending yourself then, the judge said. Looking back at Norton, he ordered, Make your opening statement, Charlie. Sure thing, George. He turned to the 6 people chosen for the jury and started to speak. I object, Judge, Daniel said and tried to stand up. Liam pushed him back down. What is your objection, Mr. Collins? I don't know much about the law, but I do know I have the right to help choose the jury. It was only yesterday that I was arrested, and I've never met these people. Objection overruled. Continue, Charlie. Daniel shook off Liam's hand and stood up. Your Honor, you're denying me my rights, and this isn't what they call due process. Sit down, Mr. Collins. The judge instructed, and Liam pushed Daniel back down in the chair. I'll decide what due process in my court is. If you continue with these interruptions, I will have you muzzled. For the first time, Daniel knew and understood that he was going to die. Damn sure I am not going to get a fair trial in this county, Daniel thought. Blood is thicker than the truth. The judge is Liam's cousin, and he's going to help Liam kill me. Don't help none that my parents always worked against him at election time. He's going to find me guilty and let Liam hang me. Don't matter much what I say. Norton stood before the jury of 5 men and 1 woman. His opening statement was brief. Ladies and gentlemen, the state will prove that that man, he pointed at Daniel, shot and killed one Philip Harris with malice aforethought. The attorney put his hand inside his coat, took hold of his vest, and took a stance as if he were a modern-day Clarence Darrow. The defendant had a run-in with Dawson 2 weeks previously concerning a hog that Dawson supposedly stole from the Collins farm. The murder of Philip Harris was the defendant's answer to that confrontation. Norton paused to let his words take effect and then continued. The state has witnesses that saw Mr. Collins shoot Mr. Dawson and run from the scene of the murder. We will prove that the defendant had the motive, means, and opportunity to commit this heinous crime. We will be asking for the death penalty. Norton sat down. Mr. Collins, you may give your opening statement now, Judge Hayes said. Daniel stood in front of the jury just as Norton had done. I didn't kill Dawson, and I was at home when they said it happened. Yeah, I didn't like him, and he did steal a hog from the farm, but when I confronted him about it, he offered to give it back or pay for it. I took the money, and that was the end of it. Liam or Sheriff Blackwood is trying to railroad me. He paused and then said, Guess that's about it. He sat down. Charlie, how long is your side going to take? I've got a meeting at 2, Judge Hayes said. Not long, Judge. Got 2 eyewitnesses and a piece of evidence to submit, and that's about it. Present your evidence and testimony, Charlie. Norton took a sealed evidence bag out of his briefcase and turned to the court. Mr. Dawson was shot and killed with a .357 pistol. This pistol, it has been recently fired, and from the empty shells in the cylinder it was fired twice, the same number of times that the victim was shot. This gun belongs to the defendant, Noah Turner. He handed the pistol to Judge Hayes and said, I ask that this pistol be marked as prosecution's Exhibit 1. Any objections, Mr. Collins? It's my gun. But Liam took it from my bedroom and fired it twice when he got outside. That doesn't prove that it killed Dawson. Objection overruled. Call your first witness, Charlie. The state calls Logan Reed to the stand. Norton said in a loud voice. A man sitting in the courtroom stood and made his way to the stand. He was sworn in and took his seat in the witness chair. Sterling was dressed in a white short-sleeve shirt and bib overalls. His only concession to being in court was a very loud, very wide tie. It hung over the bib of the overalls and had to be from 2 or 3 decades previously. It also had food stains on it. Sterling had the shakes that accompanied withdrawal from a drug, in this case alcohol. Sterling hung out at the Riverside Bar and Grill across the street from the town hall, and he was seldom sober. He would cage drinks from anyone who would listen to him. Sterling was surprised to see Daniel in court. When Ethan Caldwell gave him the money to testify, he was told he would not have to see the man he was accusing of murder. Mr. Sterling, you were in the Riverside Bar and Grill on the night in question. Is that right? Sterling's yes answer led to the next question. And what, if anything, unusual did you see? Sterling had several beads of sweat on his forehead, and his hands trembled where he had them clasped on the edge of the witness box. Daniel could see that he was coming down from his constant drunken state and was hurting. I seen a man shoot that Dawson fella. Then he stood over him and shot him again. And what time did this take place? Was about 10 p.m. I remember 'cause I just got my last beer of the night and was gonna head home after I drank it. Did you recognize the man that did the shooting? Yes, sir, it were him. Sterling pointed toward Daniel sitting behind the defendant's table. Daniel jumped to his feet and yelled, "That's a lie! I was at home, and this old drunk can't see more than 15 feet when he's been drinking, and he drinks every night until the bar closes." Sit down, Mr. Collins, the judge said. You will get your chance to cross-examine the witness. It was dark that time of night, Norton said. How can you be so sure it was Mr. Collins? The shooting was under that new town hall light. Then the killer ran, but when he did, his hat fell off. That's when I knew it was him that done the shooting. Sterling pointed at Daniel again. No further questions, Your Honor, Norton said. Your witness, Mr. Collins. When Daniel looked puzzled, the judge added, You may cross-examine the witness. Daniel stood, looked at the witness, and didn't say anything for about 30 seconds. Sterling fidgeted in his seat and looked anywhere but at Daniel. You're a liar. By 10, you're totally wasted and can barely see to walk. You couldn't have seen me. Objection, Your Honor, Norton said. Mr. Collins is badgering the witness. Is there a question from the defendant somewhere in there? Ask a question, Mr. Collins, or ill excuse the witness. What's the use? Daniel said and sat down. As Sterling left the stand, the judge told Norton to call his next witness. The state calls Nathan Bishop. The only reason that Nathan Bishop didn't hold the title of town drunk was that dubious honor belonged to Logan Reed. But if the small town had been big enough for a second town drunk, it would have been Chilton. He had at least made an effort to clean up for court. Chilton wore a clean, if wrinkled, pair of slacks and a blue button-down shirt, but he didn't wear a tie. He too was suffering from the effects of coming down from a year-long drunk. Chilton was sweating as if he'd been working in the hot sun. His shirt was hanging on him and was wet in several places. His hands had a decided tremor and couldn't seem to stay still. He even staggered getting to the witness stand. Once there, he was all shakes and shudders and couldn't seem to sit still. Norton stood and began questioning his witness. The reason you are here, Mr. Chilton, is because of what you told Sheriff Blackwood about what you saw on the night in question. What did you see? Chilton wiped his hand over his face and sat up straighter. He too was nervous at seeing Daniel in the courtroom. I seen Daniel there shoot Nick Rogers twice and then run away. And there's no doubt in your mind that it was Noah Turner who shot Mr. Dawson? Norton asked. No, it were him all right. His hat fell off when he run. That's how I knew it was him. No more questions, Your Honor, Norton said and sat back down. Your witness, Mr. Collins, Judge Hayes said. There was a bit of a smirk on his face and in his tone. Where were you when you saw me supposedly kill Dawson? Daniel didn't bother to get up. I was in my car parked on the north side of the town hall square. Why were you parked there at that time of night? I stopped to have a drink before going home. Chilton gave a small smile as he turned toward the jury. The wife don't like me to drink at home. You do that a lot, don't you, Chilton? Chilton looked puzzled and didn't answer. I heard that every night you park there with never less than a 12-pack of beer and a bottle of whiskey. Chilton looked even more nervous and didn't answer. Daniel gave Chilton a disgusted look and said, "I got no more use for this drunk." "Objection, Judge," Norton said in a loud voice as he stood up. "Sustained. Mr. Collins, you will refrain from insulting the witness." "Can't be an insult if it's the truth," Daniel replied. "This man shouldn't be allowed to walk, much less drive. Same goes for Sterling." Daniel's tone was angry. "If this wasn't a kangaroo court, I wouldn't have to do that." Judge Hayes sort of swelled up and said, "Mr. Collins, any more of that kind of talk and he'll hold you in contempt." "You're right there, Judge. I got nothing but contempt for this trial. Besides, what are you going to do to me? Put me in jail?" Daniel slid down in the chair until his neck was on the back and his legs were stretched out under the table. "Do your damnedest," he said to the judge. Judge Hayes stared at Daniel for over a minute. He was obviously angry at Daniel's outburst. Finally, he asked, "Any more on your side, Charlie?" Norton shook his head. "Then you can give your closing statement." Norton stood and stepped in front of the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen, the state has given evidence and proved that all of the factors necessary for this crime exist. Collins had the motivation. Dawson stole a hog from him. The defendant had the means, a .357 revolver, the same caliber weapon that killed Dawson, that the lab said had been fired recently, and he had the opportunity. He did the shooting late at night in a way he thought wouldn't be seen. He was wrong because the new night light at the town hall allowed our two witnesses to see him. I ask for a finding of guilty." "Thank you." He nodded at the judge and sat down. Judge Hayes looked at Daniel. "Your turn for your closing argument." This time Daniel stood and faced the jury. "You all know this is a setup. Those two witnesses haven't had a sober day in the last 5 years. Even if they could see past their drunk, they didn't see me. I was at home when Dawson was killed." Daniel sat back down. "The jury will retire, consider the evidence, and bring back a verdict," the judge ordered. The jury filed out. Daniel watched them go. Every one of those jurors was handpicked by Liam and the judge. Won't be much of a surprise at the verdict, Daniel thought. He was taken back to his cell, brought a bologna sandwich and weak coffee for lunch, and then was left alone until supper. Supper was another bologna sandwich, but this time it had a slice of cheese and mustard on it. But the coffee was from that morning. "Damn, I am eating high on the hog tonight." At 7:30 the next morning, Daniel was taken to the locker room that the sheriff and his deputy used. He was given a bar of soap, a disposable razor, a comb, and a towel. The deputy watched him the whole time as he bathed and shaved. "You all worried I am going to cut my throat or slice my wrists with this cheap razor?" "Deputy?" Daniel asked. "Get done and get dressed. You're going to see the judge this morning." Daniel was handcuffed with both wrist and ankle shackles again and led into the courtroom. Judge Hayes sort of frowned at him and pointed to the defendant's table. The jury was seated in the jury box and some looked nervous. "Do you have any evidence or witnesses to bring forth, Mr. Collins, before we hear the verdict?" the judge asked. "What good would it do? You're going to find me guilty when I am not. Guess Liam and you got it all figured out." "Very well," Judge Hayes replied. He turned toward the jury box. "Mr. Foreman, do you have a verdict? If so, stand and read it to the court." A man stood. It was Luke Harris, the owner of the only grocery store in town. Judge Hayes was a not-Sosland partner in the store. Holding up a piece of legal-sized paper, he read, "In the case of the state versus Noah Turner on the charge of first-degree murder, we the jury find the defendant." Mayfield paused and gulped before he continued, "We find him guilty of the charge." He sat down quickly and wiped the sweat off his forehead. "Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Miller said. "You are excused and may leave the courtroom. Will the defendant please rise?" Daniel looked at the judge, flipped him the bird, knowing anything he said would be useless, and remained seated. "Very well, Mr. Collins. You have been found guilty of murder in the first degree by a jury of your peers. I sentence you to hang to pay for your crime. The sentence will be carried out after the state's attorney or one of his assistants comes here and reviews the case." Now Judge Hayes gave Daniel an evil grin. "Don't worry, boy. It won't be more than a week." Daniel was taken back to his cell and the restraints were removed. This time for lunch, the deputy brought him a large cheeseburger, fries, and a soda. "Guess the condemned man gets better food," he thought as he was eating. He thought about the state's attorney coming to review the trial. Maybe he'll get to talk to him and tell him the truth. At 10 p.m., Daniel had a visitor. It was Charlotte. She had been beaten. Her left eye was swollen almost shut. Her bottom lip was split, and there were bruises on both of her arms. What happened, Charlotte? Daniel asked. Liam did it. Said he wanted you to see part of what would happen to me if you say we were together that night. Oh, Daniel, he said, he'd kill me. Charlotte had tears running down her face when she added, and Judge Hayes told me if anything happened to Liam that he'd take care of me, and I believe him. They'll kill me, stash me somewhere, and bury me, but how can I keep quiet? Daniel reached through the bars of his cell and pulled Charlotte as close as possible. He put his head against hers through the bars and ran his hands up and down her back as she cried. Swallowing hard, he stood back but continued to hold her hands. Don't worry, Charlotte. When that state's attorney gets here and reviews the trial, there's no way hell let Liam and the judge hang me. I won't have to say nothing to him about us. Charlotte looked at Daniel with hope. Your name will never come into it. Trust me. They'll always take care of and protect you. Well, I see the lovebirds are saying goodbye, Liam said as he came into the cell area. He came over and pulled Charlotte into his arms. Before they hang you, Daniel, I want you to think about who is going to be sleeping and living with your little playmate. Just so we're clear, if you use her as an alibi, it'll kill her. He pulled Charlotte out of the cell ward and into the office. Daniel lay on his bunk all night wondering if he was going to get through this trouble or would he hang like Liam promised. Sometime just before dawn, he finally fell into a troubled sleep. His last thought was, they'll just have to hope the review of the case will at least get me another trial. Best I can hope for. The guilty verdict for Noah Turner was pronounced on a Monday. The assistant state's attorney, Mark Carter, came on the following Monday to review the case. Using a small conference room, he took the next day to read the transcript, interview Judge Hayes and Sheriff Ethan Caldwell, and even had the two witnesses come in to talk to him. After his review, he found that, in his opinion, everything was on the up and up, if a little unorthodox. He went to the judge's chambers. When will you have the sentence hearing? Judge Hayes asked. We'll have the hearing tomorrow and carry out the sentence on Sunday. Got to have time to set up the gallows. I'd like to talk to Mr. Collins, if I may, Anderson requested. That's a little unorthodox, isn't it, young man? Maybe so, but it is legal. I want to talk to Collins before you carry out the sentence. Anderson was sure Collins was going to be executed. The whole trial pointed to it. Judge Hayes stared at the attorney for almost a minute, trying to intimidate him. He saw a young man who was sure of himself and wouldn't let himself be swayed. Very well, Mr. Anderson. You can have time with the defendant after the sentence is passed. Daniel was led into the courtroom on Wednesday morning. This time, Liam held on to his shirt and the back of his neck to make sure he remained standing as the judge walked to his seat behind the bench. Do you have anything to say, Mr. Collins, before I pass sentence? Knowing it wouldn't make any difference, Daniel still had to try and get through to the jury, people in the courtroom, and the state's attorney. I didn't kill Dawson. Like I said before, he stole a hog from me, but then he made it good, so we were quits. Liam and the judge have it in for me. The witnesses are a couple of drunks, and I am sure Liam forced them to testify. They chose the jurors and didn't let me get my say. Don't let them kill me. I am innocent. He jerked away from Liam but remained standing. Daniel was going to face his fate on his feet. Mr. Collins, you have been found guilty of the murder of Philip Harris. You are sentenced to be hung by the neck until you are dead on Sunday next. May God have mercy on your soul. Sheriff, return the prisoner to his cell. Daniel was on his bunk leaning on the wall on Monday evening when Anderson was allowed to see him. Sheriff, I'd like to talk to Mr. Collins face to face. Please bring him out of the cell. I know you're some high up from the state capitol, but Collins is a convicted murderer and my prisoner. He ain't coming out of that cell cept in shackles, and you ain't going to be alone with him if he leaves that cell. Very well, open the door and I'll go into the cell and you can lock the door behind me. I told you he is a murderer. Anderson stepped in front of the sheriff and stared at him. If he kills me, then you can hang him twice. Now open the door. Liam wasn't used to people confronting him but opened the cell door. After Anderson entered, Liam locked the door and stood outside watching Anderson and Daniel. Anderson waved him away, and Liam left the cell area. My name is Mark Carter, Mr. Collins, he said and shook hands with Daniel. I am the assistant state's attorney, and I have reviewed the trial. Daniel nodded and just looked at the attorney. Is there anything you want to say about the trial and the way it was conducted? Mr. Anderson, is it like I said before, I didn't kill Dawson. I was home when the shooting took place. Daniel sort of laughed. This whole thing is a setup. How so, Mr. Collins? There are only 2 lawyers in town and one is the prosecutor, so I called the other one. First, he said he'd take my case. The next day, he said he had too much going on to help me. I think Liam or Sheriff Blackwood or the judge got to him and called him off. They wouldn't let me call a lawyer in Westwood. Said ID already had my phone call. Daniel paced a little and continued, I didn't get to see the jury until the trial started. Ain't I supposed to meet them before? The 2 witnesses are drunks, and the trial is the first time they've been sober in years. The brief of the trial said you didn't want to question the jurors and refused legal counsel. Not a damn word of truth to that. The Millers are railroading me. Why would they do that? I done something that Liam didn't like, and my folks strongly opposed the judge in every election. Between Liam and the judge, they're gonna hang me. What could you have done that would make the sheriff want to execute you? Daniel shook his head and finally said, I can't tell you that, Mr. Anderson. If I do, someone I care about will be hurt. Anderson tried to get Daniel to explain, but the young man refused to say any more. If you don't tell me more, I can't stop this, Mr. Collins. For your sake, you better tell me what's going on. Can't. I just can't. Daniel had a hangdog expression, and his voice sounded defeated. Anderson waited for a few minutes, hoping Daniel would change his mind. When he didn't, Anderson called for the sheriff and left the cell. Liam waited until the attorney cleared the cell area and looked in at Daniel. That's good, Daniel. Remember what will happen if you say anything. He turned and left the area. The gallows had been erected in the city square behind the courthouse. It was 15 feet tall with a square platform 12 by 15 feet. 2 opposing sides had a thick beam running vertically above the platform with a strong crossbeam joining them at their tops. There was a trap door in the center of the platform and a lever on one side that would spring the trap. Anderson stayed in town until the day of the hanging. He watched Judge Hayes lead the way up the stairs of the gallows, followed by Daniel with his hands cuffed behind him. The deputy crowded the prisoner up the stairs and positioned him under the noose hanging down from the crossbeam. He put the noose around Daniel's neck and stepped over to the release lever and put his hand on it. Judge Hayes stood to one side of the platform. The state's attorney stepped closer to the gallows and looked up at Daniel. Daniel, what's your alibi? If you were somewhere else or have someone to verify your claim of being at your home, you don't have to die, he said in an almost pleading voice. Daniel shook his head and looked around at the few people who had come to watch. Charlotte was standing in the back of the crowd, and Liam was next to her with his hand on her shoulder. Liam tightened his grip when he saw Daniel looking at her and smirked. Charlotte had tears running down her face as she stared at Daniel. He smiled at her and mouthed, I love you. Do you have any last words, Noah Turner, before we carry out your sentence? Judge Hayes asked. He had a bit of a smirk on his face as well. I didn't kill Dawson, and you damn well know it. This is a frame-up. Daniel looked back over the crowd and said, They'll be seeing you, Liam. He turned and added, You too, Judge. The judge frowned and then grinned, You'll be dead in a couple of minutes, boy. Nevertheless, they'll be seeing both of you. I'm done talking. Do your worst. Judge Hayes motioned to the deputy, who pulled the lever. The trapdoor opened, and Daniel fell through, snapping his neck when the rope pulled him up short. Daniel felt the trapdoor open, felt the fall, and then felt the noose tighten around his neck. Then he was swinging back and forth. What's this? That didn't hurt at all. I can still see and hear what's going on. How's Charlotte? Liam held Charlotte up as she screamed and almost fell. Reckon that's done, Liam said. He pulled Charlotte forcibly along to his patrol car and left the courthouse square. Late that night, Charlotte was at her parents' home on her bed, crying. She kept playing over in her mind Daniel smiling at her and telling her he loved her. Then she would see the trapdoor open and Daniel fall with the rope around his neck. Every time she thought of Daniel swinging under the gallows, she would start to cry again. The tension and stress of the day finally got to her, and she dropped off to sleep. Shortly afterward, a blue shimmering light appeared beside the bed. Its intensity ebbed and flowed from dim to very bright. In a few seconds, a figure could be seen in the light. As the light intensified, the figure solidified and stepped out of the light. The figure reached out and touched Charlotte on the shoulder. She slowly woke up and looked around for a second and then saw the figure. Daniel, she said. Her tone was somewhere between scared and awe. You can't be here. You're dead. I saw you hang. She had gotten over her fear and was sitting up in bed. I must be dreaming. Does this feel like a dream? Daniel, or his ghost? Asked as he sat down on the bed next to Charlotte. He put his arm around her and pulled her to him. He gave her a gentle kiss and said, "I told you I'd always take care of you, that I would always protect you. I came back to do that." The voice was deep and forceful. "Don't worry, Charlotte. Everything will be all right. You'll be free shortly." The specter held her until she stopped shaking. Then it kissed her again, smiled, stood, and walked through the wall of the house. Charlotte shook her head, thinking she had been dreaming, but could still feel the pressure of the kisses. For the first time in a month, she smiled. It was the morning after the hanging, and Judge Hayes was on the 17th green lining up his putt. It wasn't a very long putt, just about 4 feet. His match with Judge Glenn Murray from another county was all even, and Wyatt had already made his putt for par. There was 1,400 riding on the outcome of Miller's shot. 2 putts for a tie, 1 to win and beat this old windbag, Miller thought. He made a practice swing and then made a shot. The ball rolled directly toward the hole, but about a foot away it made a hard turn to the left. It didn't veer or trickle offline, it made a 90-degree turn and rolled about 3 feet away. Miller couldn't believe it. He knew he had made a good shot, and had never seen a golf ball make a turn like that. He stared at the ball for several seconds. "Hell of a lot of English on that putt, George," Walker said as he tried to keep from laughing. "Don't know as I would have played it that way." Lining up the comeback putt, Miller mumbled several obscenities. "Well, I can still tie," he thought. "Won't win the money, but won't have to pay it out either." He made the short 3-foot putt, and once again, when the ball got to within a foot of the hole, it made a sharp turn, but this time to the right. It rolled about 7 feet and stopped. It sort of vibrated for a few seconds, and then the ball was still. The yelling and obscenities from Miller could be heard all the way into the clubhouse, which was 100 feet away. Several people stepped out of the bar to see what was causing so much noise. Walker tried not to laugh out loud, but this time he couldn't hold it in. Truth be told, he didn't like Miller much. He thought Miller was unprincipled, unethical, and was more concerned with how his office could make him rich and powerful instead of serving the law and the citizens of his county. "Strange putting stroke, Miller." Walker had a wide grin on his face. "That's 1,400 in lunch you owe me." Martin Hayes almost screamed, and his face was a deep, unhealthy shade of red. He swung his putter at the ball, digging a groove in the green but knocking the ball into the greenside lake. Then he threw his putter after it. Miller glared at Wyatt as he stomped across the green to his golf cart. Reaching into his golf bag, he pulled out his wallet. He counted out 14 100 bills. He came back and handed Walker the 1,400 and then added a 60. "Buy your own damned lunch," Miller said in a voice filled with anger. Miller climbed into the golf cart and stomped on the gas pedal. It didn't give him much satisfaction, as it was an electric cart and was very quiet. When he got to the parking lot, he threw his bag and clubs into the trunk of his car and drove off at a high rate of speed. "Guess he didn't like losing," Wyatt said and chuckled. He walked 100 feet to the bar and restaurant and went inside for lunch. At 11 p.m., Judge Martin Hayes was feeling no pain. He wasn't really drunk, but was close to it, thanks to the 3 large glasses of bourbon. He stood to go to bed and knocked over his empty glass on the end table next to his sofa. As he bent over to pick it up, he felt like someone put their foot on his butt and pushed hard. Miller traveled about 3 feet before hitting the floor and slid for another 2 or 3 feet. The judge picked himself up, looked around, and didn't see the faint blue light in the corner. "Guess I am drunker than I thought," he said. "Better get myself to bed. Got to be up for court tomorrow." He climbed the stairs to his bedroom and took a quick shower. Dressing in his monogrammed pajamas, he climbed into bed and laid back. "Hope the damn room doesn't start spinning. Got to get the air conditioning looked at," he thought as his bedroom had a definite chill. He pulled the quilt up over him. About an hour later, Miller awoke in a sweat. It was not very warm in the room. Whispering voices in his bedroom could be faintly heard. "I can't be hearing voices," he thought. "No, not voices, a voice. What the hell is that?" He heard another noise and sat up. Across the room, his golf bag was standing close to the wall, quivering. As he watched, his clubs, one at a time, levitated out of the bag, seemingly of their own accord. They flew at a high rate of speed and embedded themselves in the wall behind the bed. They missed Miller by no more than 2 feet. A shimmering blue light at the foot of the bed grew brighter and solidified into the figure of Noah Turner. Miller screamed like a little girl and opened the drawer in the nightstand. He grabbed his gun, a 9mm Glock 17, and shot until the slide locked open on the empty magazine. The bullets traveled through the figure and hit the wall behind it. "You can't be here," Miller yelled and started to cry. I hung you. I saw you die. Yes, you did. Now it's your turn, Miller, Daniel said. The wraith took a step closer to the bed and reached out with his hands toward Miller's chest. The hands passed through the old man into his chest, and the specter made a squeezing motion. The judge screamed, clutched his chest, and fell backward onto the bed. The wraith that was Noah Turner smiled and pulled its hands back. The figure slowly faded until just the blue light remained. Then it disappeared. Liam stopped by Judge Miller's house mid-morning the next day. The judge had a court session scheduled for 9 a.m. that morning and hadn't shown up or called to reschedule. Several phone calls to his residence and his cell phone had gone unanswered. Liam knocked, and then using a key given to him by the judge, opened the front door. The house was quiet, and there was no answer when Liam called for his cousin. Heading up the stairs, Liam shivered. Damn, the old man must have the AC set really low, Liam said. He knocked on the closed door of the main bedroom. Not hearing an answer, he opened the door and entered the room. Then he stopped dead. The judge was on his back in the middle of his bed. Damn, rigor mortis has set in. He's as stiff as a board, Liam thought as he touched the body and felt how cold it was. One of the dead man's arms was extended into the air and out from its body. The other clutched his chest over his heart. Looks like he was trying to hold something away from him. Guess I better call Doc Morris. Dr. Robert Jackson was one of 3 doctors in Jackson County, and since Springville was the county seat, he was also the medical examiner for the entire county. Had been the one to examine Dawson when he was killed. Doc Morris examined Judge Hayes in his bedroom. He made a preliminary cause of death as heart failure. Morris based his findings on the clutching of the chest and the slight blue tone of the victim's lips and around his eyes. It was a surprise to Dr. Morris. He'll know more after the autopsy, Morris told Liam. What I don't understand is the golf club stuck in the wall or the bullet holes in the wall. Oh well, they'll let you know what I find. And listen, I am sorry for your loss. The next day, Doc Morris called Liam. Well, it was a heart attack, all right. Don't understand it. I gave George an extensive physical 2 weeks ago. All tests and indications showed that he had the physique of a man 20 years younger. No signs of possible heart problems. Just goes to show you, even healthy guys get heart problems, Liam offered. The strange thing is that there was actual bruising on his heart. Morris continued. Looked like someone squeezed the heart very hard. Of course, that's impossible, and that doesn't explain the blue coloring around his eyes and his lips. Done my job, and that's the best I can give you, Liam. Have the county send my fee. Liam sat at his desk for several minutes thinking about the doc's report, the golf clubs in the wall, and the bullet holes. Wish I knew what happened, he said. Then he sat up straight. By God, I can. The old man put a security system with cameras in the house. Thought someone was stealing his booze. He stood and started toward his patrol car. Reckon I better get those recordings. The security system was better than older systems, but not as good as the new ones that uploaded data to the cloud. It didn't use tape, it recorded everything it saw and heard on DVDs. The info was kept a predetermined amount of time, and then if the disc wasn't replaced, it would erase it and use it for the next period. Liam inserted the DVD on the judge's computer, sat down, and pulled up the security feed for the night the judge died. What Liam saw was the judge sitting up and looking across the room. The image of the golf clubs flying across the room and embedding themselves in the wall made Liam stop. He replayed that part again. What the hell, Liam said. He saw the judge staring at the end of his bed. Heard the judge's comments of "You can't be here. I hung you. I saw you die." Then the feed showed Judge Hayes reach out with one hand as if protecting himself while the other clutched his chest. He fell back on the bed and was still. Liam shook his head and sat back in the chair. Who was he talking to? Liam thought, and what is with those golf clubs? Who was he trying to push away? Doesn't make any sense. Thinking another look would help, Liam replayed the footage, but nothing was different except as the video came to the end. 3 words appeared in large blood-red letters. The words "You're next." Liam pulsed from eerily bright to dim and back to bright. Then they slowly faded. Liam pushed back in the office chair, and it rolled several feet from the computer desk. He sat there, not believing what he'd seen. As he watched, the 3 words appeared again for almost a minute and then faded away again. The room had become colder, and Liam shivered. He stood up, grabbed the DVD, and left the house, almost running to get away. The patrol car starter ground but refused to start. The siren came on and ran up and down the scale. The red and blue lights flashed on and off in a random sequence. and the radio put out very loud static. Liam turned everything off, but they all came back on. Then the riot shotgun started to rattle back and forth in its holder. Liam jumped out of the car and started walking at a furious pace. He walked toward the courthouse square. After about 100 yards, he used his lapel mic to call the sheriff's office. When a deputy answered, Liam said, "Blake, my cruiser broke down in front of the judge's house. Get a tow truck and bring it back to the maintenance department." After a few seconds, he answered, "No, I don't want to wait for the tow. I am walking back." Blake and the patrol car arrived back at his office at about the same time. Blake had driven it back and got out as his boss walked up. "Nothing wrong with your car, Sheriff. As far as I can tell, started right up and drove fine." Blake handed Liam the keys to the patrol car. For the next hour or so, Liam sat at his desk and thought about the happenings of that morning. He gave Blake the security DVD. "Take a look at this and let me know what you think," he ordered. Blake took the disc to his computer station and inserted it. He sat down and waited for the DVD to play. After a few minutes, he took it out, reinserted it, and waited. Nothing happened. Blake pulled the disc and offered it back to Liam. "Hey, Sheriff, this disc is blank. What about the golf clubs?" Liam asked, "What about what the judge said? What about the words at the end? Didn't see any of that. You sure you gave me the right DVD?" Liam grabbed the disc and went back to his desk. He put the DVD in the player on his computer. In less than 3 seconds, the scene in the judge's bedroom appeared. Liam watched the images again. At the end, the same blood-colored words appeared. "You're next, Liam." He screamed in anger, ejected the disc, and broke it into several pieces. "I am going home," he told his deputy. "You got the duty." "But, Sheriff, it's my night off," Blake complained, but he was talking to Liam's back. Sheriff Blackwood didn't drink very much, but he made an exception when he got home. After 2 very large glasses of bourbon, his mind stopped spinning. Had been in an uproar since Head seen the security footage. He took his .44 revolver and put it on his nightstand. Then he dropped his belt and holster on the floor. Liam propped himself up against the headboard with a couple of pillows behind him. Charlotte was visiting her parents. She'd been there since Daniel's execution. She was sure that Liam and the judge had framed Daniel, and she wanted to leave not just her marriage, but the town as well. But Charlotte didn't have the courage to leave or file for a divorce. She wasn't sure how Liam would treat her parents if she tried to get a divorce or left town. So she would stay for now. "Damn woman," said her parents. Liam muttered, "He'll put a stop to that. She belongs home with me." Liam didn't really care that much about his wife, but he wanted her close where he could control her. "Gonna make her life hell for cheating on me with that damn Collins." He took another long drink of bourbon, and just as he started to drop off to sleep, he got cold. Liam reached for the quilt on the bed, but it wouldn't move. He sat up to pull and free the cover but was distracted by a blue shimmering light at the foot of the bed. A figure began to materialize out of the light. Liam watched as the light solidified into Noah Turner. It seemed to be holding on to the quilt. "You're dead," Liam screamed. The Wraith Daniel grinned at his victim. "I told you I'd see you again, Liam." The sheriff pawed at his pistol and finally picked it up. He fired at the figure until his weapon clicked on an empty chamber. The bullets had no effect. Liam saw his bullets pass through Daniel and hit the wall behind him, blowing large holes in the sheetrock. Daniel laughed and stepped to the side of the bed. "You can't hurt me. I am already dead. Remember? Now you're going to pay for killing me. Now you're going to pay for hurting Charlotte. Now you're going to pay." He leaned over, took a pillow from behind Liam, and pushed him down flat on his back. Liam tried to push the figure away, but his arms went through it just as his bullets had. Daniel put the pillow over his victim's face and pushed down hard. Liam struggled and pushed at the pillow. After 3 or so minutes, Liam stopped moving. "I hope you come to this afterlife, this whatever it is," Daniel's wraith said to Liam's body. "You got off too easy. I want to torture you some more." The apparition slowly faded away. Late that same night, Charlotte was in a state between wakefulness and sleep. Daniel's ghost visited her again. "You can stop being scared, Charlotte. Liam can't hurt you or your parents anymore." "What do you mean?" she asked. "I made sure he won't bother you again. Go on and enjoy your life. If you would think of me now and then. Remember, he'll always be here to protect you." The ghost disappeared as Charlotte came fully awake. Liam's body was discovered the next afternoon by his deputy. Blake had come to check in with the sheriff when there was no answer to phone calls or radio calls. The deputy quickly called Dr. Morris, the medical examiner. Morris' investigation didn't reveal much more than the one for the judge. Looks like Liam had his oxygen cut off by a pillow. Looks like he was smothered, Morris said aloud in his morgue. He had developed the habit of talking to himself while doing autopsies. Can't be. How do you smother yourself? All signs show someone doing this to the sheriff, but there wasn't any evidence of a break-in. Anyway, Liam's pistol was beside the bed and empty, and there were all those holes in the wall. He was a good shot and would have hit an intruder. And Liam had the same blue tone around his eyes and lips as Judge Hayes. A copy of Dr. Morris' report went to the state, and another copy was filed at the county courthouse along with a death certificate. The report stated a heart attack as the cause of death. The manifestation of Noah Turner sort of sat on the hillside overlooking his grave. The cold wind that was blowing made the trees dance and sway. Charlotte, wearing a long black veil of mourning, was visiting Daniel's gravesite. She came every 2 weeks to talk to Daniel. Mostly she stood by the grave, but sometimes she put her hand on the headstone and told him about her life. The wraith would listen to her and feel a little peace. She walks the hills and nobody knows, nobody sees, nobody knows but me, it said. Was justice truly served? Or do more secrets linger? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more eerie tales.